Hello, are we live? We're live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our virtual roundtable, Bridging Beyond Borders. We will be discussing what host students can do to facilitate stronger social connections to better support our international peers. This roundtable has been organized by the GenWell Project, a global human connection movement addressing the issues of social isolation, disconnection, and loneliness through the power of human connection. GenWell is in the midst of Face-to-Face February, a social media campaign in its third year designed to educate and encourage face-to-face connection, and this year has focused on the unique struggles and isolation that international students face. Today's discussion will serve to provide more information on what we as host students and administrators can do to make a real impact in the lives of our international students and peers. With us, we have Pete Bombaci, the founder and executive director of the GenWell Project, a Canadian-led but global human connection movement focused on empowering and catalyzing people around the importance of proactive, face-to-face social connection. The GenWell Project launched in 2016, and Pete is proud to be leading a movement he truly believes can make the world a happier and healthier place. We also have Loraine Centeno, who is the online editor of the Cambridge Times, Guelph Mercury Tribune, Waterloo Chronicle, and New Hamburg Independent under the Tor Stars Metroland Media. She received the Ontario Community Newspaper Association Second Place Award for 2021 Columnist of the Year for her columns on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We also have Charlotte, who is an international student here at Centennial College. She is enrolled in the Public Relations Graduate Certificate Program and is the head of the social media team working on this year's Face-to-Face February campaign. She is from Hong Kong, where she got her undergraduate degree majoring in English literature and minoring in communications. Charlotte felt the negative impacts of isolation during the COVID pandemic, which is what inspired her to work on this campaign. We have Alfunke Sophia Adelaide, who is the president of the Brandon University Students' Union and an international student in the fourth year of her nursing program. Alufunke moved to Canada from Nigeria in 2018 to pursue a career in nursing, and she is passionate about caring for individuals and improving their quality of life. Finally, we have Jennifer Cabell, the International Student Advisor for Centennial College and graduate of the University of Toronto and Hertzing College. Prior to working at Centennial, Jennifer lived overseas for 2 years in Beijing teaching, and while studying at U of T, she worked with sponsored refugees coming to Canada. Jennifer has worked with students and in the field of international education and immigration for approximately 15 years. She'll be joining us a little later in the Zoom. Starting off, Pete, can you tell us a little bit about the research that GenWell does?
Yeah, sure, Riley. And first off, I want to congratulate you for doing such a great job as the introductions here. And a huge thank you to the whole team, which are in the room here today, that helped develop Face-to-Face February for this year. Without you guys stepping up and understanding this issue, we wouldn't have this campaign. So it's really great to be here. As far as the research that GenWell does, we've done the Canadian Social Connection Survey for the last 2 years, which is really building on the research that existed about the importance of face-to-face social connection, which has really been around for 30, 40, 50 years, but most of us have never really understood it or even heard about it. And the reality is most of us took our social connections for granted prior to the global pandemic. We saw people randomly throughout the course of our day. We call them casual collisions, but we also knew about the importance of building relationships with our families and friends intuitively. But what we really need to understand now, especially as we exit the global pandemic, is that we have so many opportunities throughout the course of our day to build human connection, because many of the connections that we had pre-pandemic are no longer there. And we may not go to the office, we may not go to the gym, we may not go to the classroom, we may not see a lot of the people that we used to see, whether it's because we're not going or maybe they're not going. And I think recognizing that we need to build back these social connections, because the research now shows it's the single largest contributor to our happiness. It reduces anxiety and depression, which are at the highest levels in Canadian history. And certainly on campuses, we know that we've had issues with mental health, but we know that we have so many other things that we can do in society, even violence that we see on the streets and in the subway systems. When people feel connected and a sense of belonging, we can help society be happier and healthier, as well as every individual that's a part of it.
Thank you for that, Pete. Do you have any suggestions on how we can sort of incorporate this knowledge that we have now that we do need to be prioritizing these connections sort of tangibly in our day-to-day lives?
Yeah, it's interesting, and we were just chatting just before we got on here. Is that I think the misnomer might be that we all understand it. We've had exercise guidelines for 52 years. We've had eating guidelines for 80 years. And yet it's still difficult for some people to eat healthy every day. And it's still difficult. And I know I struggle with it, exercising my 20 to 30 minutes every day, because I know that that's what I'm supposed to do. Well, the reality is we are just now starting to come across, oh my God, I didn't realize how important social connection was for my health, my happiness, and my well-being. And so we have a long way to go to entrench this into the minds and into the, the consciousness of people, so that we actually take this and make it intentional. Make, no different than when we plan to go to the gym, we put it in our calendar. When we see our friends, we need to put it in our calendar. We're living crazy busy lives, and we need to be much more intentional in this. So the work of GenWell and the work of your team are what help us start this conversation. Because if we can help 38 million Canadians understand how important this is, we can change the world.
That's fantastic. So it does really seem like we really just need to sort of prioritize it and have those conversations with the people in our lives and perhaps direct them straight to you and the GenWell Project.
Sounds like a beautiful idea, Riley.
Fantastic. So Charlotte, does this sort of resonate with you? And can you talk about what your experience as an international student has been like with isolation?
Yeah, so actually I arrived in Canada in last September. So it is my first time studying a postgraduate degree in this college. So I think that the biggest challenge for me is like to step out of my comfort zone to meet different people, because in our class, actually we have students from across the world. So we have students from Peru, Colombia, India, all sorts of the world. So I think if you step out of your comfort zone and have self-confidence, this is really crucial for you to meet new friends and new classmates. And this is how you can avoid isolation, because by stepping out and reaching out to different people, you will not feel alone, and you'll be supported by different friends and classmates in class.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Charlotte. I don't suppose you have any advice for people who are a little shy, how they might build and develop that confidence in the first place, if you have any little tips or tricks on that.
Yeah, I think for international students, one biggest challenge is like the language barrier, because for many students, their first language or mother tongue is not English. So for me, it's Cantonese, and maybe for others, it's like Mandarin or Spanish. So I think language is really the hardest thing to come across, because if you don't have that word in your mind, like I don't know how to say that in English, I can only think of that in my mother tongue. So how am I supposed to like come up with English phrases and to speak up? For example, to Riley, like I can't speak Cantonese to you. So how am I supposed to come up with that specific phrase? So I think if you have confidence in English, or not only yeah, you can start a little by little. So even if you are talking the wrong words, like different words that you're meant to say, but once you have stepped out of your comfort zone and start to pick up the conversation, I think that's easier.
Can I just throw something in, Riley? First off, Charlotte, your English is amazing, and I can have a conversation with you for hours. But I think one of the things we need to remember in this is it's not always about educating the people that are struggling about the little things that they can do, although that's wonderful. Whether it's volunteering, joining a club, talking to strangers, because there's no commitment when you talk to a stranger. It doesn't need to be a deep, meaningful conversation right off the bat. It can be, hi, how you doing? How's your day going? But it's also about waking the broader population, the campus population, to say, hey, here's some of the challenges that an international student might face when they're on campus if they struggle with language. So maybe we can be a little more empathetic and compassionate towards the international students and recognize, as a host student, what can I do? How can I make a difference in somebody else's day by engaging them in a conversation, whether it's over a coffee, a lunch, or even sitting beside them in a classroom and talking about the subject you're in? It doesn't take a lot, but it's raising this consciousness that we are all part of the solution.
That is the perfect segue into my next question. So thank you so much for that, Pete. Which is, Charlotte, what can we as host students do better to facilitate connections with our international peers?
I believe that, like for me, because I'm not I didn't get into Canada for the first day, but like it's my second time coming to Canada. But I also want to receive some advice or tips, like which supermarket is really good, like which is cheaper, which is more expensive, or like how what activities can I join to meet more people? Like for my case, like I can only meet people from our course. Like from our course, we can only get classes with the same people. Like every day we meet the same kind of people. It's not really that boring, but I also want to meet more new people. Like there actually is a lot of classmates in our class. I think there's like 30 plus classmates, but we like every day we meet them. I also want to meet different people from different countries as well. So I think if the whole students or can people like students from Canada, they can tell me like, oh, actually for example, No Frills is a cheaper end and Metro is a higher end. Or on weekends we usually have a Friday nights at somewhere else, and you can go there to meet more people or have a drink somewhere else. So if I know more information about different kind of things, not just among the college and campus itself, it can really like widen my perspective or what I can do in my free time so I can meet more new people. So I think this is the easier way for me to build a more real human connection.
Charlotte, you're inspiring. You know, those types of that thought process is really powerful. So
thank you so much for that, Charlotte. I'm going to briefly redirect here. I see we have Jennifer joining the chat. Hello, Jennifer. So pleased to see you. So I actually have a question for you, and it's very similar to what I just asked Charlotte. I'm wondering if you have any suggestions on what post-secondaries as an institution can maybe do better to help facilitate social interactions with international students when they come to Canada or their host country.
I think that reaching the student prior to arrival to let them know about the necessary supports that are made available to them is really helpful. So when they do arrive, they know where to go and to meet new individuals within their program, within their neighborhoods, within their communities, to kind of help with an easier transition. So I know that within our college, we have a lot of social media groups that share our resources and kind of celebrate their acceptance prior to coming to Canada. And we have a Head Start program as well that's become very popular, especially over the pandemic, which kind of escalated this conversation, I believe, where it was more challenging for students to meet people when we are, locked up indoors. So the Head Start program covers some key areas that students may be asking, and also kind of talks about the different community supports within college and external outside of college as well. It's understanding your new environment, understanding where to go for help, just to make sure that you're not misunderstanding or spending an entire day trying to navigate the system without realizing that, there might be a student ambassador from the college that's here to guide you and give you that tour and that personal touch that you may be craving, especially when you're new to a new country and new culture.
Amazing. So it definitely sounds like being very proactive and conscientious with how you engage with students is important, which is unsurprising. I feel like you've touched on this in your response here, but just to go a little deeper, can you talk about what you think we are doing right and how we can prioritize that a little bit more? So you've mentioned the Head Start program. Can you give a little bit more detail of that program?
Yes, definitely. So students are provided access to join a series of webinars after they've confirmed their acceptance at the college. They've updated their profiles. They're intending to come for that upcoming semester. And so they're given access to a series of different kinds of webinars live. Some of them are recorded, that they can choose to attend them in either different format on various topics. from like housing to winter clothing to bringing your pets. And they've got a number of different college supports that participate in those programs, from like immigration to admissions to student life to the student union to the academic departments to our student leadership entire portfolio, and past students as well. So there's just a large variety of individuals that are part of the design process for those webinars and those events, let's call them. I also really do feel that student to student interaction is key to someone becoming more comfortable in their home away from home, because you kind of, when you move from one country to another, you create one part to overcome culture shock is creating your new identity in that place and that at that time, and that can be creating your own international family. I know that when I was overseas, I ended up having my own international family, which you spend the holidays with, and you make your own celebrations and your own kind of special nights out to get to know that environment, and you share in your challenges and triumphs. So the student leadership program, where you have a more senior student interacting with the new students, I find is one of the most influential programs that can help incoming students. Now, not saying that everything is perfect, because you will have, of course, extroverts and introverts, and extroverts are going to be more. Sorry, my son just got home, so he will be.
No worries.
I just picked him up the bus, so there will be definitely. You will always tend to meet the individuals that are more active in speaking out. But if you have different platforms, you might have introverts that are more comfortable utilizing social media platforms, and you have kind of different ways, different types of the information is presented, then you're giving everyone an opportunity to learn about it in their own way and slowly transition into a new space.
There's a lot of good insights in there. Thank you for sharing, Jennifer. And your note on peer-to-peer interaction and even winter clothing, which is something I know we don't always consider, reminds me of earlier in this semester. A lot of students actually got together to talk about what would be expected clothing-wise in the winter, which sort of segues into my next question for Loraine, who wrote an article sort of about the international student experience and talked a lot about unexpected costs, like purchasing winter gear, not being covered for health insurance. And I'm just curious, Loraine, if you can talk a little bit about the impact this extra financial burden has on forming social connections, especially given that so many ways we connect involve spending money.
Well, as I mentioned in the column, international students, they pay twice as much the amount of tuition that domestic students pay. For some, it's even times 3, times 4. So imagine having to worry about that, having to worry about next semester's tuition. And then on top of that, you're worried about your bills. And because Canada is going through a challenging time right now with prices of everything going up, skyrocketing rents, international students are dealing with all that. And on top of all that, you have to remember that they're also adjusting to the weather and to a different culture. And they're so far away from their social supports from their families. So I think it makes it really challenging to form social connections, because, they barely have time. They might not have enough time and energy to form these connections, because when you form relationships with people, you have to spend time with them. But then they're juggling all these things with school, and then with all the other stresses of being away from their families. So it's really tough.
Is there anything you think that post-secondaries can do to help alleviate this stress? Because as Pete mentioned at the start, social health is such a significant indicator in our overall health. So it does feel that the schools have a bit of a responsibility there. And in your experience, is there anything you think that they could be doing better?
I would encourage international students to reach out to people, to talk about your experiences, to grab every opportunity to share your experiences, because that's the only way people can understand you. I remember when I wrote the column, a lot of people reached out to me and said, I didn't know this is how it's like to be an international student in Canada. We had readers who shared the column and said, I didn't know they had to pay this much. So there are a lot of things that people in Canada don't understand or don't know yet about international students, and I would encourage international students, temporary residents, newcomers to share your stories and reach out to people. And another thing that I would want you folks to do is to find allies who will believe in your talents, who will believe in what you bring to Canada, because there are lots of them out there based on our experience. I mean, when my husband was studying as an international student, I remember he was hired by a startup, and he said the owner was like one of the kindest people he's ever worked with. I got to work, my first boss in Canada eventually became a friend and like a big sister who guided me through life in Canada. And until now, I work with amazing people, amazing locals and Canadians who have been so supportive. I work with the managing editor who's so supportive. And it's important for you to find these people to build your new tribe in Canada. You might not have family here, so it's the closest you could get to having your new family. You build your own tribe. You reach out to locals, and there are people who will believe in you. So yeah, just go find them and focus on them.
That's it's amazing you talk about finding those connections at work, because if students are spending most of their time at work and that's what's sort of taking them away from forming other connections, then that's beautiful. I know that's not something every workplace always facilitates, to put it, I think, as politely as possible. Some workplaces can be a little toxic. Do you have any tips or tricks maybe in the interview process to help international students get a sense of how welcoming maybe a workplace would be as a place to form connections and meet other people?
I think you have to read more about the company, study their DEI efforts. For my company, I know we have a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, and we're doing our best to include more voices that were previously unheard. So you have to check read reviews online, and be conscious about the messages that you will pick up during the interview, because we know and we feel when we're not welcome. So yeah. But I would suggest you read about the company first and then learn more about their efforts. And yep.
Fantastic. I feel like trust your gut is a good insight on that one. So moving back around this way, Charlotte, is there anything that you personally feel is maybe being left out of this conversation about the international student experience, and something you wish host students would know a little bit more?
Yeah, I think just now, maybe Jennifer has also mentioned about the housing problem. So, for me, I rented a condo in downtown because I have friends who are living in downtown, and this school is actually quite near to downtown. So for me, I would choose a downtown location which is nearer to my friends and also the campus. But I think for everyone, that downtown is really expensive. So, especially I'm living in a condo by myself. So I would like to know, maybe more advices from a local, which area is more safe or which area is quite dangerous. Hearing from my friends in my hometown, they told me Jane and Finch, that sort of area is really dangerous. That there are guns, that there are shots everywhere, or there are a lot of homeless living there. So downtown is a good location wise, it's near to everything and you can get to the mall, Eaton Center. So it is really accessible, but it's really expensive. But for me, because I came here not for the first time, but because I want to be convenient for myself, so I choose downtown. But I also like to know about maybe more suggestions, like which kind of area is more affordable but also safe. So housing is also important for me. So I would like to know more about that as well.
Did you have a thought there, Pete, or were you just being a gentleman and passing me the mic?
I was just being a gentleman and passing. I got lots of thoughts, but there's so much of what we talked about just now. To me, I just read a study from 2022 that said that 55% of international students are at risk of depression, and 50% are at risk of anxiety issues. And so this is a major issue. And I want to make sure that we walk away from today saying, we're doing great stuff. Jennifer's talked about some great stuff. Obviously, Loraine has her own experiences, but we have a long way to go to solve this issue. That's a study that was done in March of last year. And I would argue that the biggest challenge that we have is that every student on every campus across this country has a role to play. Jennifer can build all the programs that Jennifer can, and she can do all the work, and we can create peer-to-peer programs with the select individuals who are willing to step up and be part of the solution. But we need to educate every student on every campus the role that we all play in making the world a happier and healthier place for international students and for us. Because the research shows when we talk to people we don't know, and frankly to people we do know, i.e. we build a relationship, it makes me happier and healthier, and it makes the other person happier and healthier. And I think about talking to an international student, we learn, we grow as human beings because we learn about different cultures and different habits. Jennifer was talking about celebrating key occasions when she was overseas. How beautiful is that? But we need to awaken people that each one of us has this opportunity. And I think we continue to often look at things in the crisis. How do we help people when they're struggling? And I think we have an opportunity really to swim upstream, talk about social health, which is the proactive things of how do we get people to talk to each other, because that's what the research is showing, is that when you have good social health, it improves your mental health and your physical health. And that's what I think our goal should all be, is that if we can keep people happier and healthier, then we can take the pressure off the counseling system, off the medical system, and we can make life for every international student better because we're helping them get connected, yes, through programs, but because the person sitting beside them in class actually says, hey, how are you doing today? Because they're conscious of the impact that they can have.
Yeah, that's fantastic that you mentioned this, because I'm reminded of another study I believe we've discussed, or I'd be shocked if we hadn't, that was going, oh, yes, it was with you, on how when talking to strangers, you're almost never rejected, and how counterintuitive that feels because of that strong fear we have inside of us. And it does really feel like fear is sort of the barrier here to bridging those connections, not just on the side of the international student, but even, the confident extroverts. Do you have any advice on how to override that? Because it does feel like something that's been prolific for so long, even though all the evidence shows we should be feeling the opposite.
Well, I'm just going to choose your words carefully here, which is the evidence doesn't show that. It's what the media has got us to believe, that talking to strangers is dangerous for us. The research, Dr. Gillian Sandstrom, who's a member of our team at the GenWell Project, the research shows that over 90% of the time when we talk to strangers ends up in a positive experience for both people. What the research shows is we all underestimate the power of our interaction. We all think that people don't want to talk to us. They're not interested in us. They're going to reject us. And the reality is the research says that's not true. In actual fact, most of us are craving it, whether you're on a subway, whether you're sitting in a classroom, or wherever you might be at the coffee shop. And so we know also that when we talk to strangers, it improves our mood. It increases our trust at a time when trust in society has probably at an all-time low. And so we have the opportunity to educate people. Right now, only 20% of Canadians talk to strangers on a regular basis. So, and I don't know how that relates in the school system as to what the percentage is, but I'm going to assume it's probably pretty close. So just think of the impact that we could have if we all felt a little more comfortable by empowering people with the information to say, hey, did you know? Most of the time it works out. Most of the time it's because you're underestimating the power of your ability. And that we also know that if people do it 5 days in a row, that it increases their confidence and it increases their likelihood of wanting to do it more. So we have some ideas at the GenWell Project about creating those occasions in which people start to feel like they've been given permission to do it. Because if we can get people to try it, and Jillian says this all the time as a researcher, what's your best piece of advice? Just try it, because you'll probably find out that it was actually quite enjoyable for you and probably the person you connected with.
Amazing. I'm going to switch back over here to the Zoom again. This question is for Loraine. As Pete mentioned at the start, there's research on this going back decades, but it's clearly a current issue that we need to be talking about now. So as a journalist, do you have any suggestions on how to keep this conversation on the struggles of international students in the zeitgeist?
I think as I said a while ago, I think international students should speak up and share their stories, because that's the only way people can understand you. Today, I think journalists are doing a good job at including voices that were previously excluded. At least based on what I'm seeing in my company, we have a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. We're trying to bring in different voices from people with different backgrounds. So if we keep doing that, then I guess we can keep the conversation about immigrants, about temporary residents, about international students going. We can encourage that discourse, and keep it that way.
That's fantastic. So it sounds like right now, by Charlotte sharing her story with us right now, we're keeping this conversation in the zeitgeist. So good job, Charlotte. Thank you for your participation here. Hello. So similar question, but for Jennifer. For someone looking to create these patterns and to build that comfort in going out there and talking to people, so the next time they talk to someone, it's a little less scary. Is there any advice you'd give for that person while also navigating a new country?
I think just a rule of thumb for life is that what's the worst that could happen? If you never try, then you don't know. So the worst that could happen is that they don't respond to you. Okay, you would have been in the same situation if you didn't try to begin with. So you're putting yourself out there. You are making an effort, which is something that is a step forward to eventually meeting that person that might become part of your new international family. So I think that it's just remembering that you're in the same situation if you don't try than if you do. And just understanding that there's no harm in giving it your all. There's a few comments I did have about some statistics, some issues that have been going on for a very long time, and that impacts that 50% comment about students' mental health right now. And I think that knowledge, not just and saying hello to a student after arrival is key. It's schools and institutions can help impact the correct, to be sharing knowledge to individuals prior to their arrival, so they know about the obstacles that they're going to face once they come to Canada. Because I feel that no matter who you are, no matter if you are the most outgoing individual in the world, there is different forms of culture shock. And that is something that everyone needs to be knowledgeable on as a term, as what stages that you might face from after arrival to after 3 months to after 6 months to after 2 years. And it could be something as small as you spending 2 hours to find a grocery store that sells something that you can get back home, and making that, you're like, well, I'm going to drive 2 hours just to get a specific sauce. Well, that actually is part of you could call it homesickness, but it's something that is within that mental health piece that you may not be aware of that you're experiencing. And knowledge is such a powerful tool. and getting that knowledge to the people before it drastically impacts them, such as, hey, you're arriving in January. Let's bring it back to 2012 when we had I think it was 2012 when we had the ice storm, or 2013, and the city froze over and we had students flying in that, couldn't get anywhere. They were stuck in an airport. It's not knowledge ought to be aware of things that we can't control, and to accept that, and to know what the resources are to kind of help you overcome those challenges. And go to Value Village to get a winter jacket. Go to CCSAI, our student union, that gives away free winter jackets and free hats when you're on a tight budget. Know that there's a department to help you locate a job, because a lot of the students' anxiety and mental health it's what the lack of information that they're presented prior to arrival, they get here, and what they thought they knew is not what the reality is. And that drastically pushes that number up higher and higher. And on top of the fact that housing in the GTA has become more complex and challenging. It's always been challenging for a newcomer, but it's become even more challenging, especially if you're coming with a family of 4, or you're coming as a single mother, or you're coming as a couple. And are the schools now, most campuses, most residences across the country don't allow couples to stay in the residence. Homestays don't allow couples to stay in the residence. So where are these couples going to go? Where's the single mothers going to go? There's a liability issue for institutions to talk about. Say, like, they can't place a student into a residential home when it's on a partnership with the institution, because it's liability. So where does our responsibility? We connect students with external resources that specialize in an area. Where's the kind of the line? And it comes back down to how much knowledge and information can we share to those individuals to help them improve their success on arrival, to improve their confidence, so they're settled into a warm environment, a safe environment, that they may want to approach that person on the street because they've solved those other little things that impact their mental health, that impact their ability to fill their tummies at the end of the day. So it's like, we're talking about just the interaction. Well, I think there's so much more to that to that story, that institutions and community partnerships and students on a whole can work together as a unit to helping to accomplish. And it's a combination of talking about the positive supports out there and the obstacles within a certain light, to show people that you can accomplish this, but they need to know the tools, and they need to I don't know. I've ranted.
Yeah, no, that was
stuff.
fantastic answer. I actually really love how you sort of ended emphasizing this knowledge that needs to be out there that we don't have. When you started off talking about this idea of what's the worst they can say no, because that's something I feel we all have the knowledge of, but we haven't really internalized and processed. And I think hearing it repeated over and over and over again is one of those things we need. We really need to have it, hit the nail over the head. So we do internalize it, and we do prioritize that in our day-to-day lives, and we start to really believe it is true, because it is true. And I'm curious, Loraine, if you have any extensions on that, and if there was any unique insights you felt maybe were either left out or not highlighted strongly enough that you'd like us to know about the international student experience in that way.
I think it's it's important for locals to have more empathy, and to be more understanding. You have to educate yourselves about immigration, how it's like to move to a different country before we speak, before we say something. Because as an online editor, I spend a lot of time listening to people or reading people's comments online, and there are a lot of things that some people say that are not really really pleasant. So I wish people would first educate themselves about immigration before even attempting to speak or say something online, because yeah, you might not know everything that's going on in the life of an international student or a newcomer in Canada. So yeah.
I'm curious, Loraine, have you noticed, or do you feel that the way international students are interacted with, and how they sort of handle coming into this country has changed over time? And if so, do you feel it's been better, worse, or just a negligible change?
I'm seeing a lot of international students speaking up online. I've seen a few of them even write columns for us. So I'm really happy to see that we are hearing the voices of these people who have previously been kept out of coverage. So, but I do think that there is room for improvement. We need more people. We need them to speak up. But I understand that, for international students, it could be hard to speak up because they come in as temporary residents, not permanent residents yet. So some of them feel that it's difficult to speak up because they think, I'm not a permanent resident yet. I don't have the right to say anything. But they have to realize that they're also important to Canada. They bring a lot to Canada, and there are people who believe in them, and they're willing to listen. So yeah, just speak up and share your stories.
Thank you for sharing that. Jennifer, I'd like to ask you the same question. Have you noticed a change in how we interact with international students over time?
Well, I will note that there's been a drastic increase in different methods of communication that has stemmed from just the changing environment and the unpredictable world that we've lived in over the last. I don't want to just go right back to the pandemic, but it did. It opened up new channels. It opened up different ways of thinking. It opened up different ways of communicating. That first off started off terrifying, not just for the students who all of a sudden were just entering a new country. They just made new friends and they were sent home and told, don't leave, you're going to get sick. There was and then fast forward 2 years later, you have a mix of students that are desperate for more interaction within the classroom to the ones that want to be online because they have they have figured out their own ways of settling into their new environment and are in survival mode on I want to, this is my goal, this is what I have to do, and they only want online because that's what they become comfortable and familiar with the changing environment. I will note though, however, that yes, there's been a significant change within the classroom, outside the classroom, within our communities, with the movement of people that have left the city centers, sprawled neighborhoods. There's been so much change that that has come with multiple layers of different that have impacted that international students' experience in so many different ways. There's also been a massive increase in numbers. And so if you pull up IRS immigration, refugee, and citizenship numbers from 2020 to 2021 to 2022, we're looking at over 100,000 student increase. With 100,000 student increase in a community that doesn't have adequate housing for those individuals, then you can kind of understand that maybe the information, the knowledge isn't being shared to every single student prior to arrival. That maybe that there are some systematic issues that are beyond our conversation that we're having today that is impacting that student experience, that are occurring in those countries because of what those countries experienced, and that's being brought into our country that is shaping our environment and shaping the success of that individual. So it's not an easy question to answer, but I can tell you that in the up till 2026, we're going to continue to see a lot of growth in this sector, and the importance of interacting. And I think Loraine used a very good term, learning to be empathetic to your neighbor. I'm not just going to say international student. I'm going to say be empathetic to your neighbor. And that could be the person sitting next to you in the classroom, the person on the bus stop. Just be like, understand that we don't know what that individual is going through. And the government of Canada is investing over $2 billion, I believe, in bringing more international students to the country by 2026, and are going to be doubling. The numbers are going to triple. Let's just say that the numbers, the trends up till 2026 are we're going to have more and more students within the Canadian market. They are hoping to more populate some of the more remote regions. I'm not specifically saying about just the GTA. However, this conversation and the people learning to be more empathetic in a more virtual world is going to be very, very important to reducing the mental health impact that you were speaking about very shortly. So I missed the introduction of everyone's names, so I'm so sorry.
No,
I can't know.
I can't echo enough how much I definitely agree with you that empathy is a key component in this for sure. And I think you prioritizing that we empathize with everyone and not just international students makes a lot of sense, because I think if you're picking and choosing your empathy, it's not quite at the bar it needs to be just yet. And that was some fantastic insight. Thank you so much, Jennifer. I'm very curious after all of this back and forth to redirect to Charlotte. And I'm wondering if after all this discussion and insight, is there anything you feel we're still missing? And is there a question that you wish we either had asked you or that host students in general asked of other international students?
Yeah, maybe in the first month of our classes, like maybe for in our case, it's like September, it's like the first month of class. So maybe in September, like maybe we can have a gathering, not sort of a gathering or a Friday night or something like that, just an event to connect with each other, because we are just meeting our classmate in class. So in class, maybe you arrive early, 5 minutes early. So it's only that 5 minutes that you can like start to strike a conversation with someone. So maybe if Riley is there 5 minutes early, so I can ask her only a question for 5 minutes. Then we have class, then we dismiss. So we actually don't have time to connect with each other. The only time maybe after class we can have a coffee or we can go somewhere else to have a tea or something, but that's not enough. Like for example, maybe Loraine and Jennifer has talked about a lot of things like housing or all sort of things like. We have a lot of things to ask, like what can I go for if I have some sort of water leakage in my house. Like for example, for my case, like I have water leakage in my condo, so it's a really serious damage for my condo, and I need to reach out to a lot of people, like insurance company, contractor, and something else. So, but I'm already so occupied for my schoolwork. Like for our case, our course is really demanding, so I'm already so stressed about my course. So where am I going to ask, or who am I? So there's a lot of things that I want to ask and know about. So I think it is important for the first or the second month of class, like of our course, to connect with each other first. So maybe I can reach out to, can I have your Instagram account first, or can I have your phone number? So if I have any questions, I can like ask them first before I Google search anything, because Google is not really always correct. So I think reaching out to these real human beings are really important before I go to Google search. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing, Charlotte. And what I've really taken from what you've said is that the answer is twofold. So there's the responsibility on the student side, which sounds like the more fun responsibility of hosting a party, getting people together, and then that responsibility of the facilities of the post-secondary institutions to provide those resources of where do you go if there's a water leakage, where do you buy your groceries, how to go about the day-to-day practices. This was not a question I initially planned, but I'm curious on this note because it connects back to what you were talking about sort of at the start, how we have these isolated little bubbles. When peers reach out to host events with other peers, I know there is sort of a fear of social bubbling, but do you feel it might be advantageous for students to invite other students and their friends outside of school? Or do you think that might just be too big of an event?
If you're asking me, I think it's better for me if I can bring my friend as well, like outside of this class or this college, because I believe that by reaching out to different people from different sorts of backgrounds, it really widens your perspective. So if we're only hosting a party within our own class, you only limit to that sort of circle. You already meet that social circle in your class. So it will be more advantage for me if I can meet friends from your side. Maybe you have friends from your dancing class, or she has friends from her rock climbing class. So for me, maybe because I'm interested in rock climbing, so maybe I can know, oh, you like rock climbing, so oh, where did you go? Like, can I join as well? Or I like singing, or are there any singing courses I like to join? So I believe that bring more people into that circle or that party is really helpful as well.
Charlotte, that's fantastic that you mentioned this. I have a friend who's very into rock climbing. We'll connect later. Thank you so much for sharing. So Pete, I have this final question for you. And I think this is going to be the big one. If we are going to implement just one change from everything we've learned here today, as people, we take this with us as we leave. What is that one change that you want everyone listening and here today to start practicing?
Well, that's a big one. I think the one piece of advice, or the one thing that I would hope that would come out of this conversation today, is that we would all recognize the power of human connection to change a day, a week, a month, or maybe even a life. And it is that simple, that it's by striking up a conversation like Charlotte just described. If I had people, when we talk to people, it helps us cope, it helps us understand, it helps us find solutions, and it helps us build resilience. And I think ultimately, whether we're an international student or a host student or just a human being, all we want to do is exist and enjoy life. And I think if we can start building, and I thought Lorraine's comment about empathy, and you reinforced, I think Jennifer reinforced it, the way we build empathy and compassion for other people is by spending time with them, so that we can understand them, we can experience what their experience, we can hear what it's like to be an international student. So I go back to root causes, I go back to root issues, I go back to how can we all solve this? And it's by educating and empowering every student on every campus across this country. And I won't just say it's the students, it's the professors, it's the administrators, it's everybody. We are in this together. And so I'm inspired, and I want to finish off by saying, thank you. Thank you to you, Riley. Thank you to you. Thank you to you. Thank you to everybody that's in Ladja, Elizabeth, Jackson, who's outside, everybody that's here, put in the time and effort to spread this message today. This is part of the face-to-face February campaign that you guys developed, that Centennial College developed 3 years ago. And we have continued to share this message proudly in partnership with Centennial, but because every year we get another group of students who say, we believe in what you're trying to do. And by sharing this message through means like this, obviously we have the campaign, social media, but I think today bringing this group of people together to have this open and honest dialogue about what it's like to be an international student is how we change the world, is how we educate people, we create more empathy and compassion, and we do it one face-to-face conversation at a time. So thank you, Riley.
Thank you, Pete. That was beautiful. And thank you to all our guests, Loraine, Jennifer, Charlotte. This was fantastic. We really look forward to putting clips of this online. We are grateful to all of our guests who signed in to view this live today, and wishing you the best of luck in making face-to-face connections in the future. Thank you so much.
Riley, you killed it. Good.
Thank you.
Charlotte, honestly, such good stories.
Well, nice to meet everybody. I'll sign off.
Nice to meet you too.
Nice, Jennifer.
I'm not sure if we're still live or not, but thank you so much for coming. We really, really, really appreciate it, Loraine and Jennifer. Thank you so much.
No problem. I'll see you everyone soon.
Thank you.
Bye.